Straight games, no filler. This is Status Quo. This is episode number 20. 20 shows, 20 weeks in a row, 20 episodes. And we're going to be celebrating that today. As always, I am Queasy Crayfish, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague,
Marz Vindicator.
And we're also joined by our frequent collaborator, Status Quo label mate, and fellow genius who goes by the name of
Mark Elliott.
Yes, and we're all here today. We're celebrating, like I said, 20 episodes of Status Quo. We're not going to be talking about, who tweeted what on Cyberpunk or whatever. We're not going to be talking about what's new on Netflix this month. We're not going to be talking about the new Westworld episode. We're going to be talking about straight games and no filler, as always. Gaming trends past and present. So, since this is the 20th episode, we do have some interesting things planned for you today. We're going to go over some of our favorite topics from the previous 19 episodes, and we're going to get Mark Elliott's opinions on some of these things. And also, I should note that we have a special Status Quo EP coming out today on the SoundCloud, so you can check that out. It's just the music, from the show and some other tracks composed by myself and Marz Vindicator. Some are quite old as well, I'll point out, and back in high school, middle school even days, I think. But so that should be interesting if people want to check that out. People like the intro track and the outro track and all that stuff. So without further ado, we're going to skip the flake news today since we got a lot of topics to get through, and we'll just start right in. The first topic.
Wait. You got to explain the structure of the show. This is greatest hits.
Yeah, it's greatest hits. Well, like I said, we're going back and we're revisiting some of our old topics that we already covered in previous episodes. But since we have Mark Elliott here, we're actually going to discuss some of these things with him and see what his take is on these things. It's greatest hits. It's ones that you and I personally picked as far as some of our favorite topics from the past. I mean, of course, they were all fantastic topics. I mean, we're not gonna act like every episode wasn't brilliant, but
basically, I can't stop listening. Exactly.
We all listen every week, every Monday. But my first topic that I wanted to bring up, and I specifically because Mark Elliott has an art background and everything, he is an artist. Let's just let's just be straight up about it. We're art style versus graphics. This was the one that I picked here, and I always think this is an interesting topic because, we see a lot of stuff with especially games that are in 2D that come out now where it's like, it seems like it's a lesser game. It's got to be a budget title because it's in 2D, even if that game has a really strong art style. And I think really art style, even more than graphics, is really what sustains a game as far as making it timeless. Like if you look at some of the really old classic, even Sega Genesis titles or anything like that, it doesn't really matter if it has, crazy photoreal 3D graphics and everything if the art style is cohesive and unique and original. So that's kind of the gist of it for me. I don't know, Marz Vindicator, what do you remember about this topic?
I do remember, I think a great example of this very topic that brought us to this, of course, was talking about Octopath Traveler. So, what you have here is this, extremely great, dope new RPG that's out, on the Switch. But, obviously it doesn't look like Final Fantasy 15. It looks like Final Fantasy 6. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that as an insult. It's a 2D game. And we know the Switch can do, great graphics and everything, but what we have here is it was a brand new 2D game, but you're going to have people who are going to pass this game up because it doesn't look like Final Fantasy 15, because it doesn't look like, Spider-Man or, Shadow of the Tomb Raider or whatever. But the game is still great, and I definitely understand that some people just like great graphics. I like good graphics every now and then, but the art style, like you said, is really what I think does sustain classics, over a long period of time. I mean, even if you look at the PS1, you look at a lot of those RPGs that people, say are so great. Only some of those are 3D, and that's mostly the Final Fantasy games. A lot of the ones that people loved were like 2D or 2.5D. So at the end of the day, You got to have a great art style. Now, you do have some games that have great graphics and a great art style. And I'm definitely going to pass this over to Mark Elliott. I think I will say, I think one game that he's going to talk about that me and him both recently played almost solely because of art style, of course, was Persona 5. Right. And, this is a game, too, that, has definitely a much more modern look than, say, Octopath Traveler. But definitely, in a way, it has 3D graphics, but it's still more focused on art as opposed to just great raw graphics. So, I'll pass it over to Mark Elliott to cover Persona and anything else he wants to say.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me on this episode. I feel honored to, pitch in with my opinion on the subject. So, Persona 5. As a whole, that game's art direction really just blew my whole wig back, considering that I'm bald. So, if that says anything. I don't really know where to begin with the things that really stood out for me for that game. I guess just to get really specific right off the bat, and some things I don't think people realize is that somehow in every single scene of Persona 5, that artist somehow was able to create the most perfectly composed 3-point perspective shots in every single scene. It didn't matter if this was a city. It didn't matter if it was in a little coffee shop. It didn't matter if they were, in the middle of Shibuya or at a bookstore. Somehow the compositions always were perfectly balanced with color, come out with the backgrounds, and even having the NPCs walking around through them just with their nice muted colors to show the significance between them being in the background versus the foreground. I just really can't even put into words how much I appreciated that aspect of it. Even you being the player and you having a conversation with someone, and even when a third character comes in just to have a casual conversation, they somehow come in beautifully into the composition and fit. And even the dialogue fits in with it was just a perfect mashup of all those different elements wrapped together. So as a whole, that's just one of the many things that I appreciate about Persona 5. Another thing were the enemies, and it's simply because from an illustrative standpoint, they did a lot of work to make such a wide variety of just enemies. They're so different, and they're all right. They're really creative. Some of them are really grotesque. Some of them are really cute. The spectrum is literally from A to Z. And you never really know what you might jump into when you get to another palace in that game, because the enemies, for the most part, are accommodating to whatever palace that you're in. But still, it's always a treat to see what the next design character is going to look like when you get to the new part. So I think the amount of research that they did was impressive, and it really showed with literally every single scene. There was always something to look at in Persona 5.
Well, I guess, the thing is with that is like, so, we definitely all know that the art of Persona, was dope and everything. But I guess, where do you stand on the point that, how important do you see graphics versus the actual art style, and how do you take and differentiate the two? You know what I'm saying? You have some games that, pretty much are just based on having photorealistic graphics. They don't necessarily have a clear art style per se. Whereas you have some games that are like Octopath Traveler that like are just purely art. Then you have games in the middle like Metal Gear Solid where you have this great art that becomes these photorealistic graphics, but still, pays homage to the art. Like where do you stand on that? Where do you tend to find your favorite games? Where do you think, games should go?
I guess that's a different way to kind of look at it. So I guess in that light, when it comes to a game's art versus its graphics, it's strange. I don't necessarily believe that the art that's separate from the game needs to look like the game itself all the time, just because because I think like with the game, like for example, like Kingdom Hearts, the art style of that game, in my opinion, is a little bit different than the actual game itself. The game is a little more clean, a little more cute, and kind of soft and bubbly versus the actual art style, which is really edgy and almost sketch-like. So when I take those two things, they somehow work because you look at the art style, it's really edgy, I think it's really cool, and then when you hop into the game, you get this really fantastical kind of environment. So then with Persona 5, in that respect, they're definitely more lined up because the art of the actual game is very well represented in the game itself. So there really is a nice transition from one to the other. So as a whole, when it comes to games, I don't know that I think it's necessarily important that the art has to mimic the game. I think it should have some liking to what the game is going to look like, but the art, I think, is meant to achieve one thing, and the game is supposed to do another.
Well, I think that's a valid point. I think more what I was getting at was more just the general like aesthetic of the game itself, because I mean, and I think that can kind of include also just like the manual and the supplemental art as far as like in Metal Gear Solid, these character sketches and these paintings and stuff like that. But I think just like when you look at a game like Metal Gear Solid, I feel like it just the way that everything presents itself, like just the entire presentation, kind of makes it stand out from just being like a PlayStation game. If you look at a game like, say, I don't know, like Infamous or something, on PS4, like it's just kind of this game, or Watch Dogs or something like that. Like there's not really like if you look at it, you're gonna say, okay, that's a PS4 game, But if you look at a game like, Metal Gear Solid 2 or 3 or something like that, I feel like the art direction and the production style just kind of elevates that above. Okay. You know what I mean? Like it kind of just it could be timeless in that sense is what I'm getting at.
Okay. I guess so that I don't go off on a different tangent with that. I definitely more so appreciate a game that does have a solid art and direction in its presentation. So when I look at a game like Persona 5, I definitely see that the art direction was much more thought out than, let's say, a game like you mentioned, like Watch Dogs.
Right.
So
Watch Dogs.
It's kind of like
game.
It's like one of our favorite games to just trash constantly. Yeah.
So it's just, I mean, I guess we'll just throw that out there now. So, yeah. So, I mean, I guess it's interesting because, people just play games just to play games. And then I guess it depends on what you're looking for in a game. I know myself, I'm very partial to a game's art direction. And if it has that, that's just going to add to my experience versus someone else is saying, oh, it looks cool. And then that's where it ends. As long as it looks cool, that's where it is. And then they'll just go straight to gameplay. But for me, it has to be more all inclusive of all those elements. So like a game like Octopath Traveler, definitely that game is just straight, just art. I mean, you could just get lost looking at the whole thing as a whole, just for the visuals alone.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's pretty much, I think that's kind of where we arrived at. And originally when we touched on that topic was just like, the art style and the art direction and stuff just elevates, what could have been a basic game like Watch Dogs to something that's more a piece of art and more something that's a timeless product. But we don't want to spend all day on this. So Marz Vindicator, why don't you give us a topic to discuss or rediscuss rather?
So another topic that I want to talk comes from episode number 2. This is something we talked about very early on, and to be frank about it, I don't even actually remember exactly what we both said about this topic. But I've personally had some new revelations or some new thoughts on this topic, some I want to cover. So it's re-releases and compilations. Okay. So since this topic, I have I guess you could say been grateful enough to hear that like a couple of my favorite games of all time, pretty much from one of my favorite eras, the PS2 era, are going to be remade. Okay. And I've already had my reservations as well as my liking towards re-releases and compilations and things like that. But as time goes on, I've kind of changed habits with things the way, I do retro games, all this other type of stuff. Some, we may discuss later. I just, I've kind of had some different thoughts on this. So basically, to get straight to the point, the reason I'm bringing this topic up is mainly because Onimusha, and I don't even know if you guys heard, but Katamari Damacy is going to get a re-release. Did you guys hear about that?
Yeah, just today actually I saw that.
Okay, and it's going to be on the Switch, which is going to be cool. But and also since then, I've bought Shenmue 1 and 2 HD. I've bought Zone of the Enders, the second runner in VR. So, we've gotten to see a lot of cool things and we've gotten to play a lot of cool games. But if you guys go back and check my manifesto, which luckily for you guys is not a topic we're going to cover today. I don't want to talk anybody's ears off. But, I just have kind of started to feel that we're doing a whole lot of living in the past, when it comes to games. And, one thing that I really want to make sure to do, which is something I've had a long conversation with Mark Elliott about, is that I want to stay focused on the present and also be looking at the future. A lot of what makes even this show possible is just the sheer fact that Queasy, Crayfish, and I, we spent a lifetime playing games and enjoying games. And, with the exception of a couple of, generational overlaps or something, we played games as they came out, and it's something I've said before. If it was 1998, I was playing Metal Gear Solid. Queasy Crayfish was playing Ocarina of Time. We weren't still trying to make our way through, we weren't still only playing Sonic 1 at that time. We were playing the new games, playing, what was coming out. And I do understand that some games won't be as enjoyable to older audiences, Fortnite, and, I'm not trying to, dive into PUBG or anything, but there's a lot of new stuff out here. And while I do love to see a good re-release, sometimes it pains me when, I kind of look up and this is like the most exciting news for me, when there's a Sony event and the thing I'm most excited about is that I get to play Spyro again, So while I do love these games, I just kind of want to make the point that I really have been trying to focus myself on playing what comes in the future. Now, I'm not telling you I'm not going to buy Katamari or I'm not going to buy Onimusha. Hell no. I'm going to be the first person in line. I'm going to buy both of those games. I'm very happy that they're coming back. But at the same time, though, I really just honestly do hope the developers, do spend as much time making new experiences as they have with creating old ones. And there's a lot more I can go on this topic about because it's definitely deeper than just that. But I'll pass the mic to you, Queasy Crayfish. Any new thoughts on re-releases and compilation?
Actually, yeah, there's some new thoughts because as you're talking there, I was thinking about like the most recent games that I've bought. Like the majority of them are re-releases. Like there's Sega Genesis Classics. Right. There was Dark Souls remastered. Excuse me. There was Flashback 25th Anniversary Edition and Shenmue 1 and 2.
Don't forget Agony, which was like a re-release of a bowel movement,
Okay, yeah, that's fair. That was in there, but and the other thing about this, I mean, yeah, I absolutely agree. It's like it feels silly to be like, like I get all excited to go out and buy these two new games that came out, and it's just Dark Souls remastered and Sega Genesis Classics on the same day. Like that's ridiculous to me. But at the same time, also like the thing that I've noticed in playing these, like again, is that like there's a lot of problems with some of these re-releases. Sometimes, like Shenmue 1 and 2 has. I don't know how much you've played it, as far as getting into the re-releases, but like there's a lot of problems with like the sound and the music, things that cut out, graphical problems, cutscene problems, just general performance problems. Like there's a lot of issues with that re-release. And at the end of the day, I'm still happy that it exists. I'm happy that I don't have to break out the Dreamcast every time I want to play Shenmue now. But still, like I think it's interesting to point out how many problems there are with that. And with Flashback in an earlier episode, I talked about that, how Flashback has all kinds of sound issues and, weird decisions as far as the cutscenes went and other glitches and stuff like that. And Dark Souls Remastered, another one that personally, I haven't had a lot of problems with it, but like the community I know is very upset about some of the changes they made to PvP and stuff like that in the original Dark Souls. And so I think it's just like, you know, not only are we replaying these games over and over and over again, you know, playing old games in modern times, but there's also often they're like lackluster or inferior versions even to the originals. And so it's like, you know, at what point is it going to be where they're just re-releasing these over and over again, and we're in the, you know, 10th or 12th generation, and we're still playing, you know, we're playing progressively worse versions of these games as they get remastered and re-released over and over. It's just, I don't know. It's a slippery slope we might be headed down.
Almost definitely. Definitely. You know, and what I was gonna say was actually kind of like a bit. It was almost kind of like opposite of that. Like, I guess I haven't found like too many. I mean, I guess the only big issues I can point out that I've really noticed in re-releases are like when they've done like those Sega Genesis classics and like the soundboards on them are just terrible. You know, and it's, you know, and that kills the whole music, which is a big vibe of a lot of Genesis games. But for me, one thing that I really enjoy with at least having these re-releases is when they do try to add something new to it, right? So I would have buzzed one of the enders anyway, but the fact that I can play it in VR, even if it's not the best VR experience, I think is, you know, very interesting. Katamari should be great, considering that it's, number one, it's going to be portable. Number two, is going to have, you know, I guess some sort of weird control with the Switch controllers. And while I'm not a huge fan of motion control, I feel like for something like Katamari, you know, it kind of works. You know, it's this weird, quirky game. So I definitely do enjoy, you know, when they do things like that. But yeah, you know, but otherwise, you know, yeah, playing, you know, sometimes when it's just the exact same game or even a worse version, you know, that's just ridiculous. Now, Mark Elliott, do you have any thoughts on re-releases or compilations, you know, bringing up games past?
I mean, it's kind of hard to follow up what you two just said. I mean, you kind of covered a lot of what I would say, but I guess overall, what I would just say is, I don't want to be stuck, you know, doing the Harlem Shake in like 2027.
Are you talking about
just when it comes to like
Bad
playing
Boy Harlem Shake or the vibrant Harlem Shake?
Neither. So for sure. No, just so, I mean, like, yeah, that's how I take from it. You know, there's plenty of heat out there that's out right now. You brought up a fantastic point. You know, back when we were playing games back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we were playing the games that came out then. And then, yes, we're older now, and we always have a preference towards what came out during our era because we see the significance of those games and how much they have a close place in our heart. But I mean, there are games out now that have some juice. It's just a matter of doing the research and just literally just trying them out.
For sure.
Yeah.
Definitely can feel that. So, Queasy, let's see. What's our next greatest hits topic here?
Okay, well, this is definitely a greatest hit. Everyone's going to love this one. Gaming journalism, the return of gaming journalism. And, you know, I don't really want to talk about it too much, but there was, you know, Marz Vindicator and I were, you know, texting back and forth earlier about another great Polygon article regarding some tweets made by cyberpunk developers, CD Projekt Red. So, you know, I think a lot of it at the end of the day with gaming journalism is just like, I think we kind of realized this tonight when we were talking about it before we started this show was like, where has the coverage of games gone? You know, like people don't, if you go on to any of these big websites anymore, you know, GameSpot, IGN, Polygon, of course, you know, any of the big ones, there's so little information about like games and what's going on, or just commentary about them, or, you know, analysis or anything like that, or just general knowledge of the games, of like gaming history or anything like that. It's all just like social commentary or, you know, reviews or, you know, like tips. Like I see a lot of like, you know, Fortnite season 8, you know, here's the new such and such changes, and, you know, Destiny Zero locations and stuff, you know, like it's just, I don't know. It seems like just hollow, meaningless things that you could get anywhere. So like, why am I going to go to a GameSpot when I could just go, just Google it or something like that? I don't know. It just seems like there's no journalism, I guess. It's like, it reminds me of back in the day when I'd read, I'd wait all month to get a new Electronic Gaming Monthly in the mail, and then I'd read it cover to cover, and there'd be all kinds of great editorials and articles and, different takes about games and stuff like that. And now you just don't see that. It's all just like, people making, just some huge issues about these like meaningless things that the developers say, or people complaining about representation in games or things like that, which is like, there's a place for that, but like not in the place of just general commentary, which doesn't seem to exist anymore. So I don't know, Marz or Mark Elliott, what do you think about game journalism?
Well, I'll take this one. It's, yeah, I brought up the article earlier. As a black man who plays video games, I have had my share of, I guess you could say, video game related, social injustices or bad experiences or things like that. But at the end of the day, the main thing I want is to play video games and to know about video games and to read about video games, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes, while I can honestly say that I've had those experiences, I can't honestly say that I felt like, at least me personally, I would just say me personally, I never felt that there was this huge gap missing in, say, a game magazine's coverage of, games if they didn't talk about, racial injustices or things like that. And I'll admit, I did a lot more reading of game magazines when I was younger. So I guess you could argue that I just didn't notice. But at the end of the day, even today, when I go to a video game website and I see anything that's other than just like straight up news about video games, it honestly kind of turns me off. And honestly, we definitely bring up these articles that have to do a lot with injustices and things like that. Those honestly aren't even, they're not 100%, the major offenders of this. A lot of times you go to game news sites and, they want to talk about the rarest Funko Pops. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, I understand, that you have your, Fry from Futurama dressed up as Freddy Krueger, dressed up as the White Ranger Funko Pop. You know what I'm saying? But like, I don't care about that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I have that one. I have that one.
I hope so. And I hope you paid $6 for it, because that's all it's going to be worth in the future. These 2018 Beanie Babies, it's like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just want to know about games. I'd like to have decent reviews. I'd like to have, or honestly, just no reviews, or I would just love to know about games. And I get that the gaming landscape is huge, but there used to be so many different types of, dope articles out there and dope things to see in games. And I'll admit, there's been some cool things that I've seen on game websites. Maybe the coolest thing that I've seen as of late was this series that I believe it was Kotaku was working on, where the guy was like basically playing the Japanese version of Final Fantasy VII and then doing kind of like a lost in translation thing and comparing that to like its actual translation, right, in English. And that was kind of cool because, it brings up a lot of different points. And as somebody who, studies Japanese and language, et cetera, that was just a really cool article to me, but then it just sucks when those things are overshadowed by, terrible reviews, terrible coverage, and things that have nothing to do with games, so, and I get it. We live in 2018 where, you got to break the news first. You got to come up with something new. You got to come up with something different. Yeah, in 2000, not even 2000, in 1998, if GamePro, EGM, and Tips and Tricks just all made E3 articles, like that would have been fine, But I get it now that they have to come up with this stuff, sometimes out of their ass to get diversified content and new stuff and break the story first. But, what is it really doing for me? So, Mark Elliott, have you had any opinions on game journalism or anything of that matter?
I guess the only comment that I would make, which I think you kind of just said towards the end of it, is 2018, in that when it comes to journalism, yes, people used to pick up, an actual like magazine, read it front and back, and that's how you got informed. But now, I mean, that's not even necessary when I can just go on YouTube and look up my favorite person that's going to review the game anyway, or stream the game and review it as they're playing it. So I think it's just so much more open to so many other voices that I think it kind of makes the gaming journalism obsolete. Is that out of turn to say? Is that at least that's how I kind of take it. I mean, my little brother watches those YouTube, streamers on the regular, because they're the ones that, you go to first. Those personalities, they play those games, they cover them first. And then that's just it. I can literally just log onto their channel and get the review for the brand new Valkyrie Chronicles 4 that just dropped, or something like that. Like, who knows? So
no, I do definitely think that's a great point. Every time a new fighting game is out, it's always Maximilian who's got this like reaction video to it, right? Which typically is going to be way more informative than anything like GameSpot could put out.
Yeah. Well, I think that was kind of a point that we had talked about as well, was like there's no personalities on these websites anymore. Like you go to GameSpot, you're not going to be able to tell who's reviewing what, because they're just nobodies usually. I mean, unless you're really into GameSpot or something like that. But even in that case, I think they outsource a lot of that, or they just have freelance people write a lot of these articles anyway. So you don't even know who these people are that are reviewing these games, or you don't know what their tastes are or anything like that. Whereas I can watch Avoiding the Puddle play, some, new Resident Evil or something like that, and I'm going to trust his opinion on it because, he's played them all and I know he has, and I've watched him play them before, and it's just so much more valuable to get that opinion than, or even if I disagree with his opinion, it's like, okay, well, I know he doesn't like these kind of games anyway, so, it might still be something for me or whatever. But if it's just some no-name person on IGN, like, I don't know what they're about. I don't know what kind of games they like.
I mean, yeah, because just the act of streaming has now created a whole new level of authenticity and validity in someone's review. Because not only, before, we just had this no-face person that we read, knew their name, and okay, I can't wait for another one of their reviews. But I can literally watch this person looking at me, telling me how this game is going as they're playing it. So of course I'm gonna understand and trust him 100% because I'm watching it unfold. So I see it as like a new level of trust that they've created with that platform versus, the former.
All right, I think that's pretty accurate. Marz Vindicator, what's next?
Well, this topic ties into my first topic, but it is from episode number 13, and that is retro evaluation. Okay, so now this may not be the exact same as the time we did the topic before. I just kind of want to say some things about retro games. I've spoken to Queasy Crayfish a bit about this, and I've spoken to Mark Elliott and a great deal about this. And if any of you have listened to my manifesto, you know that I kind of recently took a new spin, a new take on collecting retro games. And you were even able to hear a bit of that when I brought up my first topic, which was, about re-releases. And it just had to do with the fact that I don't want to keep playing the same games over and over again. Right. So, but of course, the idea of retro games and re-releases are much different than the idea of, the retro games in itself. Now, while I do still have my qualms with re-releases and things like that, one of the things that have really made me want to get rid of my retro games is the idea of re-releases and compilations. And one thing that I've kind of liked about that situation is that, even though it's still old stuff, to an extent, you kind of get to relive the idea of hearing an announcement and being able to play a certain game, right? You know, it is at any given time after those games came out, I could have gone to the store and bought, you know, the Onimusha series and played it whenever I wanted to, sold it again and played it again, right? It was there. But when they announced that Onimusha was going to come to the PS4, you know, that was the first time I got this news about this series. You know, now I'm hyped to go buy, you know, even though it's the same game, I'm hyped to go buy it again, you know. So I'll never be able to recreate me playing Onimusha for the first time, right? And pretty much all those times in between where I may have bought the games and played them, you know, those aren't necessarily particular memories for me because they were just me buying the game and playing it, right? But me hearing that it was going to be re-released, you know, which just so happened to be the day after the announcement of Streets of Rage 4, you know, it's like, this is a new moment in my gaming life that I'll never forget, right? So while I have my qualms with those, I've definitely taken much more of a liking to those than I have with retro games. Now, another thing with retro games, I mean, again, people are free to do whatever they want to do. I can't lie. I have a small interest in getting a Windows 95 PC just for the shit of it. You know what I'm saying? And setting it up and using Microsoft Paint and things like that. I think it'd be hilarious, right? But, you know, it's just... You know, there's just things, you know, like, for example, when I get online and, you know, I'm reading an article about a guy. He's like, yeah, man, you know, last week I went to this garage sale and I finally picked up a Model 1 Sega CD, you know, but the power button was, you know, had mud on it. And then the disc laser, you know, the disc laser was burnt out. So I got online, I ordered one from the Philippines and that cost me about a good $94. And I got it installed in there and I was able to play Sonic CD pretty well. But then I played Snatcher and, you know, there are just some parts that didn't read the disc. So then I opened it back up and then I kind of tweaked it again. And then I looked around and, you know, finally I just came across my copy of Sylphid out of my girlfriend's grandmother's attic. And, you know, and then I was going to put that in there, you know, but I couldn't play it because I realized the Model 1 Genesis was messed up. So then I went and got my Model 1 Genesis. I took the thing out. I got the pins clean and all that. Used a lot of rub and alcohol, 7 bottles to be exact. And I finally got that hooked up. And then I put it back on the Model 1 Sega Genesis, but then my goddamn, you know, my AV cables were frayed. So then I got the AV cables and I got them kind of hooked up, brought them over to the Home Depot. And then I asked them, hey, you guys know anything about Sega Genesis AV cables? And the guy was like, what's a Sega Genesis? So then I had to bring them back home and I looked up on Reddit and tried to find some things about Sega Genesis AV cables, and I found this company that's out of Denmark that you can order brand new Sega Genesis AV cables from. They just cost you, you know, $212 a pop. So I finally got my, you know, I got my new Sega Genesis AV cables, and I got everything hooked up on my CRT, and it was going well. And it's like, you did all that shit to play something you could play on the emulator. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Marz Vindicator, everybody.
And you know, look, I mean, look, everybody. You know, this is just real life. You know what I'm saying? This is just real life. Yeah, you know, these are the things that I get on the internet and see. And again, you know, to each his own. I know some people love, you know, setting up old game systems and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I just can't be bothered because on top of the fact that playing the old games themselves takes away from the time. There's just so much that goes into all these retro games. Now, I'm not telling you that I'll never hook up my PS2 again and play a game or two of NBA Street, right? But I just don't want to base my whole gaming experience in 2018 off of, you know, something that came out in 2004. So does anybody else have any colorful statements about retro games?
I'm going to give this one to Mark Elliott.
Right.
Also, this is a new character, though. I will say for you, I haven't heard this redneck hillbilly gaming collector.
Oh, they exist.
I've definitely heard that character.
They exist.
I mean, I'm familiar with the Metal Jesus impersonation, but
oh my gosh,
they definitely.
All right. Well, so. To kind of piggyback off what Marz had just mentioned, you know, with the whole retro gaming thing, me and him had a spell when I had recently moved back home, where we started getting back into video game collecting. So he was out there just finding hidden gems and other things out there. Then I started jumping back into collecting PS2 games. And what I found, at least for me, was really weird, is that I can't recreate any single experience that I had as a kid for any of these games, let alone the ones I did play back then versus the ones that I never played. So really, for just the longest time, I was kind of just like lying to myself, the fact that I'm actually going to go through all of these. Now, I have gone through some of them, but then, like you had said...
yeah, like Metal Gear Solid 2, the ones we already knew were good.
Exactly. So it's just like, aside from the few that I already have played and a few new ones that, I've always wanted to play that game. But then, like you said, it takes away from, what's out now, because these games are still full lengthy 50, 60 plus hour games that are taken away from other games that are just as long, Right. So the act of collecting games, and like you said before, to each their own, I understand that. But it's just interesting. And actually, on the topic of someone like Metal Jesus, who is, a firm advocate for retro gaming, it's crazy how he kind of influences the market for the retro gaming culture. So people will go out and now actually bother to, go out and find, Rule of Rose, for ridiculous, like, $300, $400. But it's just like, I wouldn't even know what that game is. Had it not been for Metal Jesus, like, telling me about this. Oh man, I remember when I went out and got this game, and I knew I should have picked it up when it came out, because now it's going for money. It's just, so is it really worth me paying $300 because Metal Jesus and his boy told me to go out and get it? For me, not so much. There's plenty more I could do with $300. And actually, one thing I think you left out, Martin, was that you recently are trying to become more. Kind of taking a liking to the idea of like minimalism, and how, that's a different way to, absorb the things that you enjoy. So you have the fewest physical things on your person, so that you can always have the physical space for new things. And once you're done with those things, you get rid of those things, and then you make space for new things. But within the retro gaming, it can just easily turn to clutter.
Okay, without a doubt.
It can easily turn to clutter.
Without a doubt.
Like, and, clutter, that's relative to the person. I get that. But at least for me, clean environment, clean mind. The fewer things you have to worry about, the better. Because one thing I always say to Marz is, God forbid that your retro game collection goes up in flames.
Right.
Like, if you have a house fire and all of your shit just goes up, I pray to Zeus and Kratos that you will be okay. Because I look at some of their collections, I'm thinking to myself, like, man, you better have the most premier, house and damage and fire insurance, or any kind of anything disaster related that can happen to your home. You better have it if you have that kind of game collection. Because for your times 20 platinum exclusive Japanese fight stick that only works with Darkstalkers, I really hope I really hope that you have that thing appraised and insured, so that Well,
yeah, and and the terrible thing about that is, like, appraised. Like, I mean,
that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, like, do those things really even have value? Outside of the the 6 people. Yeah, and then there's that too, like buying games and just never opening them. And yeah, I mean, it's just that whole scene. It just got absurd to me. I mean, come on, like world track meet on the NES. Like, it's just nuts, especially when, I mean, like, you can download that game in like 2 seconds and play it.
And see, like, it's man, yeah.
and another thing too, that came out of this as well, which I've been noticing now. It's very obvious that Nintendo is doing most of what they can to make money off of this trend, because as we've mentioned before, you buy retro games, you're not really even supporting any game developers, right? So that's kind of the thing that kills me with all these retro gamers. You know, they applaud themselves for hunting down and finding this game, but it's like, I mean, you've bought Snatcher now 3 times and sold it again. So that $1,500 that you spent on this game, not a single cent of it went to Kojima.
Hey, you know what? I think we definitely should break down just the math of that insanity if you really want to take it there. Because think about it. People go out and spend, let's say, $10, $15 on gas to get to and from all the different yard sales and and flea markets and all that. So they spend the gas to get to there. Then they find the grungy pieces of, few gems that they find, if they are considered gems, which most of the time they're not, because I watch them saying, it's like, all right, well, I got a copy of this, and then I got a copy of Final Fantasy, 5 here. That was the best part I got there. And then I just so managed to get this one right here, a bunch of 10-footers. I'm not gonna touch any of those. And then they put all this list off. So they bought all the games for, and like you said, they praise themselves for having spent only $100 on this. But then when they finally flip it, they only make a $40 profit.
Right.
I just don't understand that. Plus your time has now been taken up. And time is also money. Like, you've wasted the gas to get to and from that joint. You've wasted the time to actually wait for it to sell, hope that it sells, and then when it doesn't, you got to pay for shipping to get it to the person to get the game. So at the end of the day, like, all your money went to the trouble of like acquiring getting the game. So it's just like, yes, if I go to a garage sale and I see Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for $5, of course I'm going to pick it up because that's a heck of a come up. Like, but otherwise, to me, it's just it's way more work than what it's worth. Especially if I think if that's like a side hustle, it's like, so, I got an extra $20 that I can spend at the bar on a couple beers.
Right, and talk about that retro game that I just sold.
It's like, oh, you won't believe what I found today. It's just, like
fucking Dracula Hakushaku.
Yeah, I was waiting for that.
FM Towns Marty.
I got it on the FM Towns.
And this is a super rare game. I finally cleaned all the crud off and I sold it. Why does every retro game have crud?
Dude, I was about to say, yeah. What's up with the dookie on old games?
Every single one.
It doesn't matter in vinegar overnight.
Every single one.
Like every one of them. Always on the inside of it. I'll go to disc replay and I'm wondering like, what were you doing around this game?
My ass, but Xeno's got saga manuals.
But it's not just the one game; it's several games. So I think it's just it's some like ubiquitous just act that happens. Just everywhere that it would just kind of takes a dookie on their games one day.
It's like the retro shit stain got. How you got crud on Snatcher? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you doing?
Dude, exactly. And then to make it worse, like, you have Snatcher and you got Dookie on it. Like, I'm not going to get Dookie on any of my games, period. It's just not going to happen.
I'm not going to get Dookie on any of my things. But I will put it on my, special edition Japanese PS2, and also smoke mini cigarettes around it so that it turns yellow.
Leave it in direct sunlight for days.
For 6 days, yeah.
Oh my god,
6 months. I leave my PlayStations outside, especially when they're white. What's wrong with people?
All right,
man.
This is a sub series, I think, right?
I think it needs to go. We need to make this a whole series.
My last topic that I wanted to bring up was fighting games past and present. And, all three of us are fighting game veterans, to varying degrees. And so, Mark Elliott, I'll let you lead this one off, I think. What do you remember about, fighting games in the past, and how do you feel about how they've changed into the present?
Fighting games are the reason why I play video games. Period. Period. And the reason being is, one, because my greatest memories of games are pretty much all fighting games. But two, I'll never forget this memory. I think I've told Marz about this several times. I remember while I was still living in Ohio, I was at this after school bowling after school. I was at this after school bowling program, after school, after school thing. And they had an arcade section in there. And in that arcade section, they have this Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter machine. And when I first witnessed that thing, I was mesmerized because it's this older dude was playing on it. And he had this big old black dread-headed black demon thing fighting, Ryu, as I formerly knew him. And I thought, what is going on this screen? Just all the crazy colors, the crazy just graphics, and just sensory overload. I needed to know what this game was. And then to make matters worse, then Spider-Man jumped on the screen. So that for me right there was the beginning of I needed to play everything that has to do with two people beating the crap out of each other on the screen. So from there, it evolved to Mortal Kombat 2, Virtua Fighter. Oh man, the list goes on and on. Just everything from back then, and seeing them now, I am so incredibly excited because I feel like fighting games are now making a comeback. Like for a while, I feel like I had a general opinion that games were all about shooters and like MMOs and things like that. And then to see these new games coming out, like the new Samurai Showdown, Samurai Spirits, I think it's called.
Yes, that's just the Japanese name.
Well, so, okay, well, either way, so yeah, Samurai Spirits is dropping, or it was announced. Most recently Street Fighter, 5, has been going through the circuit. Tekken 7, cross tag battle. It's just there's so many fighting games out to play, and then to boot, there's a whole entire fighting game culture that's out there. People, for other fighting game enthusiasts who are also into fighting games. So I'm really excited for the future of that whole genre because it's how I started off, and it looks like it's how I'm going to keep going.
Definitely with that. Most definitely with that. There's always a whole lot that I could say about fighting games. I would say for me too, I guess I do still have a lot of other memories that, are about non-fighting games, but it's always kind of been this constant genre that's always been there. And I've kind of gone through, all different types of games. I honestly started off as a Mortal Kombat player, and then that changed over into like things like Virtua Fighter, and then it went to Tekken, and Street Fighter was in there from time to time, and it just kind of went on. And I'm definitely, just like you said, very excited to see that fighting games are, kind of making this huge comeback, because for a long while it just kind of felt like, the games weren't there, but we're definitely get a lot of them. I do still think though that there are other areas where we could be getting more fighting games. Some things that I think are still missing, like I think Capcom definitely needs another fighting game out. They have Street Fighter, then of course they have Marvel, right? But we all know Marvel is, not that good. So I would love to see another Darkstalkers, or I would love to see, a great versus games, from them. But then, it's also cool to see that, for the longest time, there was kind of like this, fighting game, bad girls club that nobody else could break into. You had the Capcom games, right? And then you had the Namco games. You had Virtua Fighter, and then you had Mortal Kombat, right? And I felt like that was pretty much the kind of the top. But since then, Arc System Works has just, nudged their way in there. And, I think a lot of people are kind of, newly getting into some of their games, like, obviously Fighter Z, Guilty Gear, Blast Blue. But I mean, this is already like a 20-year-old. The Guilty Gear is like 20 years old, So it's just cool to see them, making so many waves. Like in this Evo last year, they had 2 games, whereas Capcom had 1, which is just amazing since that the whole tournament was pretty much based off of Capcom games only at first, So I'm just glad to see that there's still fighting games coming out. I'm glad to see that we're still getting new experiences. And I just hope that we definitely get more.
Yeah, I'm definitely happy with all the, the many options out there. I think for me, the only thing is the decrease in focus on the single player to now being more like it's hyper competitive environment now with fighting games, where it's like the entire focus of every new fighting game that comes out practically is like competitive play, and how are we going to get this at all the tournaments, and how are we going to make it streamlined so it's tournament friendly and everything. And to some degree, I think that makes the games superior because there's much more focus on like balancing and making sure everything, there's not crazy infinite combos and stuff like that. But I do miss a lot of the single player content that we used to get in a lot of these games. Of course, not in Capcom games, as we've discussed before, but at least in Namco games, usually you got a lot of story content, endings, extra modes, especially like Soul Calibur and stuff like that. So I'm definitely be interested to see like Soul Calibur 6. Is it going to still maintain some of that, or hopefully a good amount of that? Because I think just like the single player fighting game experience is definitely, I wouldn't say in jeopardy, but it's there's definitely less focus put on it than it was in the past, and I'm excited to see. Well, actually, now that I'm saying that, I have to kind of check myself because like Mortal Kombat did have a lot of single player content. Tekken, of course, has like the treasure battle and all that. So these modes still exist, but I feel like there's just way less focus put on them, I guess.
I was gonna say yes, I definitely agree with what Queasy was saying, and I mostly noticed that because of so like recently we got Lei and Anna in Tekken 7, right?
Uh-huh.
And this is dope. And yes, like at the end of the day, the fighting aspect of it, the competitive aspect, was always kind of what I mainly played. But I used to always just love to see who was about to slap who and who's ending between Nina and Anna. Right. That's just how it always went. Sometimes she got slapped. Sometimes, Anna was, at the beach, getting, picked up by 6 different dudes. Sometimes they was at the daddy's grave and Anna getting slapped. It was just always something new. Anna pulling out rocket launchers, but then, I look up and we got Lei, we got Anna. That's dope, but they didn't add them. They didn't give them any story content, and what they had for story content in Tekken 7 was mostly kind of bad anyway. Right. So yeah, there's definitely that aspect of Tekken, which was gone. And the reason why that is so notable to me in Tekken, noticeable, is because that was one of the reasons that made me play Tekken in the first place, because I came from Virtua Fighter, which, as we all know, is a great fighting game in terms of the roster and the gameplay, right? But as we've said many times before, the characters in that game are just caricatures of people that appear in fighting games. White girl, white guy, ninja, Chinese girl. So it didn't have that story element. And then you go to play Tekken, and it's got all these endings with different art styles, and it was crazy. So it sucks to not have that there.
I definitely think that there needs to be back to basics when it comes to just story. And I think story is what's going to carry anything and everything to tomorrow. Without actually great storytelling and character development, everything is just going to seem very shallow, just down the board. And you're right. Like Tekken, for example, I even playing through that whole thing, I'm wondering, like, that was it? That's all I got for the story? Like, just... Oh, so that's how it ends.
Exactly.
I wonder how Tekken 8's gonna go.
But
like not in like a good way. It's I should be just like, oh man, that was crazy. Tekken 8's gonna be just dope. Now I'm just like, guess we'll just wait for the sequel now.
All right.
Which is kind of very anticlimactic. With even less story.
Tekken Battle Royale.
and still very like, yeah, just Tekken battle race. It'll be Tekken Smash Bros.
You say that now.
I know. I probably shouldn't say it. I probably shouldn't say it out loud.
Don't give him any ideas.
Seriously.
Well, Mars Vindicator, last topic for today for our 20th anniversary.
Well, this is a topic that we discussed on episode 3. And it's, a topic that, is very dear to me. And it has to do with the representation of, black iron workers in Marvel Comics. Okay. They just don't do a very good job of that. Okay?
Oh my God.
I'm just kidding. But
I saw you penning some strongly worded tweets.
Right. Yeah.
Earlier.
I kind of had it, what's wrong with them?
I think you should create a whole nother character that talks about those iron workers.
I think I will get them in the MCU. Damn it. But no, actually, I am going to throw everybody for a loop because I had told Queasy Crayfish what my last topic was going to be, but I'm going to change it.
Oh, dear.
And this is from number 11. And it kind of ties slightly into the last topic, but it is the Japanese Renaissance. Okay. Now, what is the Japanese Renaissance? It's basically last generation. There were like 2 Japanese games. Now this generation, we have more than we can shake a stick at. And it's very cool. It's very dope. I love it. It's very fun. They're very fun. I really enjoy playing things like Yakuza. I really, do enjoy a majority of these fighting games that have come back out, that are Japanese. I'm loving Dragon Quest, right? That game is definitely very, very dope. I am definitely loving Dragon Quest. But
there's a but.
Here recently, I've been playing Spider-Man. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Now, don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen. I am in no way, shape, or form saying that we should change any of the aforementioned games that I mentioned. Those games all need to exist and exist in the form that they do. However, one of the things that I just love about Spider-Man is just like when they let Spider-Man, like when you are just loose in New York and you just, web slinging, like the amount of detail, the scope of the world, like it is amazing, right? Now, I've talked a lot about open world games before and how sometimes they just get to be too much. I think one thing that I really like about Spider-Man, which kind of makes it kind of cool for me, is just the fact that it's source material that I already know. So I don't necessarily feel like I have to always dive into this new world again. They can just kind of bring characters on screen without introducing them because we already know who they are, right? So that kind of helps that game out for me. But I just really would love to see, honestly, I really honestly would love to see a Japanese developer do a huge actual AAA big open world game. Right. And the only reason I say that I would love them to do a good one of these is because I still think that if they do it, it's still going to have a bit of that Japanese quirkiness to it. And we've had some great attempts. I think Metal Gear Solid 5 was a great game, but it was missing some things. I think I wouldn't even really consider the Yakuza games because those games' scope have barely even increased since the PS2. Yakuza is Yakuza, right? But I just do think that it's something that the Japanese developers have not done. And I don't want them to lose any soul with it. I understand that there's like a very small, window where this type of thing can exist without them totally selling out. But I think that if they came out with something good, I think it'd be very enjoyable. Kind of like Final Fantasy 15, for example, right? Like I didn't really necessarily enjoy that as a Final Fantasy game. But I think that if that open world had a lot more detail in it and it was like another JRPG, it would be a cool thing to see. And while we're getting a lot of dope Japanese games, But when we talk about things like Metal Gear Solid 2, for example, right? Like that wasn't just a dope Japanese game. That was the peak of gaming technology at the time, right? Ocarina of Time, same thing. Like it was the peak of gaming technology, right? At least if you talk about consoles. So I just would love to see a Japanese developer give us something like that again. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I mean, how do you feel about Breath of the Wild?
Well, again, the Switch is not the Xbox One X or the PS4
technology.
Exactly. So yeah, so in terms of gameplay and scope, I think Breath of the Wild was great, but like, you know, like we remember, like I love Breath of the Wild. I think Breath of the Wild is one of the greatest games of all time. Like, I do still think that, but I think we all remember how dope it felt the first time we saw that, you know, that fight with Link with Ganondorf and that like Twilight Princess engine, right? Like it still just kind of burns me that we probably will never see that. You know, while I still respect what Nintendo does, it just burns me a little bit that I feel like we'll never see that.
Why do you think we'll never see it?
Because Nintendo is not going to make a game console with good graphics ever.
Well, I mean, not just that, but I mean, like what you're saying, like the peak performance, peak graphics, peak gaming technology, open world.
Oh no, I was specifically saying Zelda. We'll never see that. I think that we could see, you know, a peak performance Japanese game. You know, that is great. Honestly, if done correctly. Well, okay, I won't say if done correctly. I think it could be Death Stranding.
Man,
I do think that could be the one. Because that game definitely looks like it's big and like it's open and
it's quirky enough.
I guess the only thing that the Japanese games are missing is just that like huge AAA appeal, which I mean, it doesn't have to be there, right? Like it doesn't have to be there for me to enjoy the game. But like, I mean, it was fun. Like when Metal Gear Solid 2 was like the top of the gaming world. It was just great to me, you know? And I mean, the game doesn't have to be like liked by everybody, but I'm just kind of interested to see if a Japanese developer like can even do that. And if they will even do that. You know, and like, and what would that game be? You know, it would, you know, like, it's kind of like we got Monster Hunter, but would there ever be a true Japanese competitor in terms of numbers with something like Fortnite or Call of Duty or PUBG? You know what I'm saying? Like, will a Japanese game really come back and really like take everybody over? You know what I'm saying?
Just one thing, just because I don't want to, I feel like I'm kind of ignorant to that term you were using. You said that AAA appeal. What do you mean by that?
I mean, like where it's just, well, yeah, I was gonna say like Metal Gear Solid, but I mean, well, yeah, I mean, like the AAA appeal is just like when that game is just the biggest game on the planet at that time.
Oh, okay.
You know, I guess. I mean, I would say even to an extent, I would say Kingdom Hearts had that, like when it released, right? Because I mean, there were commercials on TV. I mean, Kingdom Hearts basically made Utada popular in America. You know what I'm saying? Like something like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like here you have like this huge Japanese artist who has got together with Timbaland to make a US album, still falls flat. Leave it up to Square Enix and Disney to like bring her to American audiences through commercials. You know what I'm saying? Like, will we see a Japanese game come back with that sort of power? You know?
I don't know. I mean, do they have... I guess I would just say... I feel like Japanese developers make kind of a different style of game, at least now. Well, actually, I don't know. I mean, it's like kind of like what you're saying with Dragon Quest. It's like Dragon Quest is like, it's like a Japanese RPG. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if Japanese developers are prone to making like a Skyrim or something like that, or some kind of big giant, or certainly a Spider-Man. You know, I mean, I guess you had like Nier and things like that, where you had, you know, kind of crazy action and stuff, you know, things that are, I guess, appealing to mass audiences. But I feel like the Japanese sensibilities of that game make it kind of, or just, you know, like the weird stuff with the robots and Gatling guns and all kind of transforming machines and stuff. I don't know. It's just like some of those things. I don't know if they are going to be able to appeal to wide enough of an audience in today's gaming landscape. Because I mean, back in the day, it was like, if you were a gamer, like, you were probably pretty used to playing like Japanese stuff, because that was like, you know, the majority of the stuff, really. I mean, so like you were into that kind of stuff anyway. Whereas now it's like, you know, some people don't play any Japanese games at all. You know, they only play Western developed shooters or sports games or something like that. And they have zero interest in something that has, you know, something that's like Nier Automata or something like that. So I don't know. It's like, are they even capable of reaching that kind of mass appeal anymore? I mean, certainly I love a lot of Japanese stuff, but I don't know if, you know, Joe Six-Pack playing, you know, Madden is going to be into it.
Yeah, pick something like that up. No, I mean, yeah, no, that's most definitely true. You know, and you know, and there's definitely other lanes that, you know, Japanese developers have kind of, I mean, yeah, like, you know, when you look at like the top selling games, you're going to get stuff like Odyssey up there, like you mentioned, Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart 8. You know, but that always still kind of feels like this is the Nintendo market, you know, and you just kind of expect it to, you know, be there, and, you know, and those games are going to sell, but it just, I guess to me, it just always kind of feels like the Japanese games are still always kind of in this like niche market, you know. But who knows, you know?
I mean, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I think it's an acquired taste to be into playing Japanese games, just because, I mean, honestly, unless I actually knew you, Marz, there's a lot of games I wouldn't have even bothered to pick up, because, you know, in younger years, I would just judge them based on face value. And unless someone told me otherwise, I was like, oh, that's just some weird, you know, like Japanese thing. But as I got older, you know, I just became more accustomed to it. It's an acquired taste.
Right.
So, you know, I remember when I first saw, I think it was Persona 3, when like the characters would be like shooting themselves in the head to make, you know, they're like they're weird, like they're like, you know, weird inner beings to come out of themselves. And I was just like, oh, definitely not playing that. Like I definitely just like completely just like cast that to the side. And then playing Persona 5, I didn't know what to expect. Now, granted, they are very different temperatures in their entirety. Like Persona 3 is, I mean, yeah, it's still Persona, but I feel like it definitely has a way different vibe than 5 does. And 5 can appeal to a way larger audience than 3 ever could.
Right.
Mainly, you know, at least for me, because, you know, shooting themselves in the head, it's not going to fly.
That's definitely true. You know, I mean, like, you know, like they've tried some things, you know, like Metal Gear Survive, right? But, you know, we see how well that worked. And I mean, you know, look, like Pokemon Go took over the world, right? And I guess, in a sense, you could kind of say something like that was, you know, at the peak of games, right? Because, you know, we're dealing with, you know, like mobile games and all that type of stuff. But still, though, you know, I just wonder if Japanese games will ever be like they were in the 90s. Not to say like they should, or like, you know, I'm not gonna play games if they don't get like that. I'm just saying, like, I wonder if it'll ever happen. You know, we get like a Japanese takeover instead of a renaissance.
I mean, I'm down for that. I mean, they definitely like, you know, most of the new games that have come out that I've enjoyed have been Japanese. I mean, Octopath Traveler, you know, just to name one. I mean, and then of course, like, you know, Shenmue's my favorite game. Playing that over again now, it's like, you know, it just feels feels timeless, feels classic to me, feels, even though it is culturally very different from things that I'm used to, living in the Midwestern United States is still like, you can still relate to it on just a human level. And I think just a lot of that, quote unquote quirkiness, the Japanese quirkiness is really what makes it all the more interesting. So I'm definitely down for a Japanese takeover. Get rid of all these battle royale copycat games.
Right. Good Lord.
All right. Well, anything else to add? Any other bits of news or whatever?
I don't know. I guess I don't have anything specifically to say about, any of these topics per se, but I'm definitely glad that, Status Quo has just gotten to the level that it has. We're on episode 20. We don't have any signs of slowing down. We're gonna keep going. I just, I'm just very glad to be doing this podcast.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you to Mark Elliott for joining us, and hope to have you back in the near future.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yes, some very insightful commentary. But what would you expect from three geniuses? That's pretty much what we do. So
every day you get this.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this has been Status Quo episode number 20. 20 weeks, 20 episodes, straight games, no filler. Also check out the EP if you're interested in some game beats and so on. Composed by Marz Vindicator and myself. And we'll see you next Monday, episode 21.
There it is.